Tom Bergeron is a 2-time Emmy Award and 1-time scratch-off ticket lottery winner. What more could one ask for in a career? And although he's been a household name since hosting Hollywood Squares, America's Funniest Videos, Dancing with the Stars, I bet he really owes it all to Granite State Challenge. Yeah, that's a game show that he hosted on public television in New Hampshire back in the day. Nothing says I have a future in rubbing elbows with celebrities like hosting a quiz bowl for high school kids. What you may not know about Tom is that he is also a master whistler, despite his protests that he says it's just a hobby. He also sings Sinatra tunes while dressed like a taco, and he has been referred to as the messenger of death. Well, not really. You're going to have to check that one out for yourself. Just don't ask Tom if he starred in Goonies. We don't know where that one came from, but he believes it's a lie propagated by those who wish him to stay a mainstream actor, and he has far too many other irons in the fire, like trying to get Dick Van Dyke to put him in his next musical, which is simply never going to happen. We are so excited to have you. And one of the things that I think there's so many things I'm fascinated about with you. I'm going to stop just, fangirling, but the evolution.
It's okay.
Yeah. But the evolution of your career is really interesting. And I wanted you to start with that because not only did you know what you wanted to do, but you went after it. But then along the way, people were like, okay, that's great. You want to be in radio, for instance, at first, but then go do certain things to make sure just because you have a job in it, just don't accept that. So I think there were a lot of people that pushed you along the way. So will you talk a little bit about, your start in this and really how it gave you the bug for performance of this kind?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I did have a forward trajectory only vaguely defined to broadcasting or theater. So my career had sort of that vague sense of direction. And then it was a matter of being motivated and opportunistic, I think, because like in high school, I found out that one of the English teachers was a part-time newsman at the local radio station. So I decided to make him my best friend, whether he wanted to be or not. And ultimately we ended up working together for years, and he became a dear friend and a mentor to me. And that's something that I think has been really important in my life, I think is important in many people's lives. And I endeavor to try to be that person for people coming up, that those people that are unselfish about helping you along. And Ed Johnson was the first person, this English teacher who was also the newsman, who introduced me to the station manager. And I got my job when my voice was still changing in radio in high school. And then years later, a buddy of mine who just passed prior to the pandemic, who was a psychologist and an adventurer, and he encouraged me to do things like take a plane hopping, hitchhiking radio series across country, which was a pivotal part of my career taking off. Another mentor was a mime. Tony Montanaro, who had studied with and performed with Marcel Marceau and had a theater in South Paris, Maine, so I could get by on a lie detector. If I said I studied mime in Paris, I could.
There you go.
Kind of did. But he also was just a wonderfully influential person in my development as sort of a performer and a broadcaster too, ironically enough. So it's been through, my having a sense of where I wanted to go, but also the great good fortune of having people who helped me along the way at pivotal times. So, it takes a village to build a career, I think, too. Yeah.
Just a random weird question. Is it still true today? I was surprised that you had to go take a test to get FCC clearance or something to get the first job in radio. Is that something that still is today, or is that because you had to work the knobs?
I don't think so. Yeah, I had to work. It was a third-class operator's permit, I think it was. Is that right, Eddie? I got it right? And I had to go to the Custom House building in Boston, and my dad drove me there, and I had studied, and I flunked the first time, and I was beside myself. I was convinced that they scored it wrong, and it just, And I just, oh no, this is horrible. And of course, when you're a teenager hoping to start work in radio, and you're told you have to wait 3 months to come back and, and take the test again, it seems like an eternity. And as it happened, my dad, trying to mollify me on the ride home from Boston, we went to a favorite Chinese restaurant, and it turned out the station manager was sitting in another booth. And he asked me how it went. I said, "Oh, I just flunked. I didn't make it in 3 months." He was like eating. He goes, "Yeah, okay. So in 3 months, we'll start then." It was just, 3 months to him wasn't 3 months to me, delivering newspapers for extra cash.
When you first made the kind of that first venture into television, did you really want that? Because you had really kind of moved yourself on a radio path.
Yeah, I really had. There was a buddy of mine who, because I was doing a morning radio show at one point in my hometown, and in the evening I was part of a theater company doing mime performances.
Wow.
And he said, and I love this observation. He said, "It's strange. When we hear you, we can't see you, and when we see you, we can't hear you." And, but yeah, when I was doing the radio show in New Hampshire, which was like 80, right after I came back from that hitchhiking plane hopping radio series, that station offered me a full-time gig, 7 to midnight show, because the guy who previously had it was leaving to start his own production company in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. So, I hadn't had a steady paycheck in a while, so I said, "I'm in, yes." And then they gave me just plenty of rope. I mean, creative freedom. And that show was listened to by people in the North Shore of Massachusetts and the seacoast of New Hampshire, some of whom worked in Boston television. So I got a couple of phone calls from different affiliates to come down and audition for things in television. And at that point, too, New Hampshire Public Television had asked me to host a weekly magazine show, sort of like the PM magazines or evening magazines that were popular in syndication in the 80s and early 90s. But so I started to transition a little bit, and unexpectedly, into television. So at one point, I was doing the nightly 5 hours a night radio show in New Hampshire, and driving down to Boston to shoot a weekly kids show called Super Kids, which was a magazine format, and also do whatever I could at that TV station, which was then an NBC affiliate, because I had my foot in the door. Mm-hmm. So, whenever, if the announcer was off for the day or something, I'd drive down and sit in a booth and record all the little commercials and things. So yeah, whatever. But the TV thing, to your point, Michael, was completely out of left field. I did not expect that at all.
I've had the fortunate pleasure to work with you many, many years ago at Good Morning America, where you co-host, you filled in for Charlie. Yeah. And then you came back later on, the host of Dancing with the Stars, to GMA, right. Many times. You were always professional, always nice, always funny, but never nervous. So at any time in your career, was there any type of nervousness? And if you did have it, how'd you get over it?
Well, yes, early on there was. I have a sense memory of the first time when I was 17, still a high school senior, and I was doing a Saturday night rock show. And I remember feeling the actual control. There was you had to turn the switch to the right and turn the pot up to open the microphone. Okay. And I can still feel my hand shaking. And I think when I interviewed Mo and Larry sitting in my parents' house, my childhood home, with a cassette tape recorder, until Mo wasn't angry that Larry gave me his home number, I was pretty nervous, but then it settled down. But now, and over the years, and I've said this to students too, I said, energy is a constant. I mean, we're all made of vibrating atoms and such. And if you label the energy you're feeling as anxiety or nervousness, as opposed to excitement and opportunity,
Wow.
That's the yin and the yang of it. That's the negative positive. And when I did the dancing show, which was live, I was in my element. When I would come by GMA, I loved doing that because it was live, and I knew all of you guys were the perfect team to play with. So I didn't get nervous. I got excited.
Good.
In the early years, I got nervous until I realized I didn't have to develop a broadcasting persona, because when you're listening as a kid in the 60s and 70s, a lot of the radio guys were like this. Okay, cats and kittens, we're coming at you with top 40, but first, let's check the forecast, all that stuff. Oh my
That's
God.
really good.
Yeah, but only as parody. But once I realized I'll just be myself, and there's no heavy lifting there, and I don't have to think about shifting gears that much. Then it became a pure joy. And doing GMA when we were trotting out the new cast twice a year in the early years was just a real pleasure. A real pleasure. And I that was on stage in Newburyport, Massachusetts. I would say to the audience, somebody give me a character, somebody give me a situation, I'll make something up.
Sure.
And did that. And to your point, Michael, it was like it was already written, and it was being just channeled through me. And my agent at the time sat I remember her expression was like, and I made the fatal mistake of going, hey, I'm pretty good.
Wow.
And the very next improv, it was rancid. It was like, whoa. By that point, my agent was avoiding eye contact, within minutes.
She's sneaking out the back door.
Yeah, that's right. Well, that went south really quick.
But do you think that that's kind of what, when you talk, especially when you write about it, about this sense of being live television, how much you love that?
Yeah.
I get this sense that that's you being plugged into the moment, being plugged into the universe, but being completely right there where you are. So you're listening and you're focused and you're right in the moment.
Yeah, that's a really good description. Tony, my teacher in South Paris, Maine, used to describe it as, how on the deck are you? Are you on the deck? Are you here now? Or are you worried about something else, or projecting something? And meditation is the tool that I use to help build that mental muscle. I would when I was doing the dance show, we would do a dress rehearsal, and then I'd usually have about an hour and a half between the end of the dress rehearsal and the beginning of the live show. And I would meditate in my dressing room, hopefully for like around 20 minutes if I had that time, or whatever time, if there were issues with the production that we had to deal with, I would just eke out whatever time I could. But it was important just to make sure that I was there. I was just aware of my environment and ready for anything. Whether somebody faints or charges the stage or whatever happens, it would just be something that I could roll with and control to a point.
Did you ever have somebody charge the stage?
Yeah, we did. When Ryan Lochte was one of the contestants, we had a couple of people who weren't thrilled that. Yeah,
Wow.
But I have to say, our security people. The head of security, Dave, who I just love this guy. He had one of those guys sucking floor so fast. I mean, I just barely out of my peripheral vision saw somebody running towards us. And then I saw Dave take him down like a sack of potatoes. It was like, okay, yeah, we'll be right back.
And Dave was definitely on deck.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yes, he was. Yeah. Yeah. That was one of the advantages too. I remember after Marie Osmond passed out on live television, a couple of days later, Jerry Springer sent me this lovely voicemail. Saying, "Oh, you handled that so well," and all this. And I said, "Thanks, Jerry." But the truth of the matter is, all I did was throw to a commercial. I mean, wouldn't it be great if in life, if a real tense thing comes up, you could go, "We'll be right back." Wouldn't that be great? You just get rear-ended in traffic or T-boned. You go, oh, okay. before we exchange papers, we'll be right back.
I'm thinking next time I have an argument with my husband, and we're going to take a short commercial break, and we'll be right back.
Right. Here's a word from our sponsor, Divorce Court. Yeah. Again, live television, WBZ in Boston, that NBC affiliate. I was the host of the lottery drawings for about 2 years, I think, one of the first contracts I had. And so on Wednesdays and Saturdays, at the end of the daily number, you'd say, all right, come back in 2 hours for the Megabucks drawing. The jackpot will be blah, blah, blah. So I said that, and the lottery people were all like, why did you say $3 million or something? I said, I didn't say 3 million. Yeah, you did. I said, no, I said, 1 million. I know it's one. And so we went back to the tape room in the days of tape rooms, and they rolled the tape, and there I am saying, we'll be back with $3 million. I was like, I was possessed. I wasn't aware that I said it. I was watching myself say it back to me, not believing what I was singing. Yeah, luckily they didn't make me make up the difference.
I know. I wondered about that. Like, what if somebody called and complained and said, "You told me it was X amount of dollars"?
I think I apologized. I think I started the Megabucks drawing with, "All right, time for our $1 million drawing. Despite what you may have heard earlier, that was wishful thinking on my behalf." Blah blah blah. Just keep going.
Exactly.
Just keep going. Yeah.
When you think about your career over the span and where you started, at the little radio station, and where you also had to fill in for the guy who sometimes drank too much and passed out on air, over, to the point where, you are, I know you laughed at me when I said you're an icon, but you're an American television icon. Okay. Everybody loves you, including me. Did you think at that time big enough to think nationally?
No.
Because I think sometimes, a lot of people don't think where they are and can't see the next potential big steps.
Yeah, I don't think I ever really approached it that way. Nor did I approach it from the standpoint of, I'll hear people, it's a very competitive business, and this, that, and the other thing. I never competed against anybody but myself. Mm-hmm. My own sense of, am I doing the best I can with this particular environment that I find myself in, this particular gig. And it was then, with that sort of as my foundation, that I'm competing against the best version of myself as I believe it to be at any given point. Mm-hmm. Then it was, what opportunities are here that I can seize on to make it even more fun? The idea of doing a cross-country radio series was born of how desperately unemployed I was at the time, and that it was a good time to try it because, it's not like I had anything else going on at the time. I remember going during that unemployed period, instead of embracing broadcasting, for some reason, I was at a period in my life that I took it for granted, that it came too easily. So I thought, well, obviously that's not a career. I should look somewhere else, and did trade shows a little bit, and this, that, and the other thing. And I remember being in an industrial park, the Ward Hill Industrial Park in Haverhill, Massachusetts, filling out a job application. I felt soul dead at that point, and I was filling it out, and there was a little box that said salary desired, and they wanted you basically to negotiate against yourself and put a number. Yeah. All I put was yes. Salary desired? Yes. Yeah. And it broke me up. I started to laugh, and I thought, that's my ticket out. Yeah. My sense of humor is my ticket out of this despair, this depression. Wow. And I literally got up, crumpled the paper up, tossed it away, and went out and thought, okay, then what do I want to do? And that birthed the going to radio stations and proposing this cross-country trip. And the one station in New Hampshire took a gamble on me. Yeah. But it was only after I was willing to take a gamble on me,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally get that. I felt that sense. And what as I was reading that story, well, first of all, I was a little worried about you, but, hitchhiking wasn't quite out of the norm as it is today.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
but, that sense of I'm going to do something that is risky. I mean, and I don't mean risky in like a put yourself in danger, although you could have, and
yeah.
you were sleeping on park benches at times, but risky because you didn't know what the outcome was going to be. And if it succeeded, it could be great. And if it failed, you really didn't have a lot to lose. But a lot of people will still try and take what they consider the safer bet instead of
Hmm.
taking
Hmm.
some risks like that.
Yeah.
And, when I read that, I got the sense of, that's how you really, get those next steps and then see what the next possibility is.
Yeah, calling Mo and Larry, as a 16-year-old was, it was just something I felt compelled to do, and it did in fact help later on to secure that broadcasting job because I played some of those interviews over the morning notices at Haverhill High. I was the host of the morning notices, and I turned
Mhm.
that into a morning radio show. I would
Oh,
have
right.
people come in and sing the lunch menu. Pizza and tuna fish, that's what we have today. It
Yeah.
was, and I actually had uh, fellow students say, I come in to hear the morning notices, and then I end up sticking around for classes. So it was it
Wow,
was
you're a good
great.
warm-up act.
Yeah. So, and I played some of the Mo and Larry interviews in the morning at the high school, that I think perked up the ear of that English teacher who ultimately whose class I was in, his public speaking class. So it is all a tapestry, however oddly sewn it appears at times.
When you're talking to America, right, which is right through the lens, but then
Yeah.
you have a live audience. How does that work for
Oh,
you?
that's good.
That's a really good question, Eddie. And it was like we'd break for a commercial if I had friends who I'd gotten tickets to come to the show, and I'd go over and, you enjoying the show? And they would say almost to a we can't hear you. And I would say, but I'm not talking to you. You
Wow.
know,
Right,
I'm
right.
talking to that one person
Yeah.
through the lens.
Yeah.
So even though we had 700 people in the ballroom audience,
Right.
and we knew we had, especially in the early years, millions of people watching at home, I was talking to one person, that sort of generic. As a matter of fact, and an approach that's in my first radio job in my hometown. When I was first starting, I had an album cover, and I forget even who the group was, but the album featured a very attractive woman, her face on the album cover. So I'm convinced that for the first couple of years of my career, I just sounded horny. Just
You're like, "Hey, baby,
yeah. Hey, good morning, everyone.
how are you doing?"
Yeah, I'm a Taurus. How about you? Yeah, but so I wasn't playing to the room. I
Okay.
was playing to you guys at home.
Well, and then you talked too about, and I remember when you did the dance on Dancing with the Stars, where you
Mhm.
danced yourself. But
Yeah,
what I really loved about that, because we're trying to encourage people who are watching to, really be present, but to really understand who you're talking to, but also how many different audiences you're serving,
right.
because you're serving that person on the other end of the camera, you're serving the station that brought you in, you're
Mhm.
serving the goals of the interviewer who's interviewing you, but ultimately you have to find that balance and understand it and make it not about you but about all
Right.
those other people. When you decided to learn a dance and really go through the motion and then do it live, I love that story. Will you talk a little bit about the
Yeah, and
decision
I
to do
think
that?
that was a case of me wanting to serve the show and the
Mhm,
couples. The first season of that show was just 6 weeks, and none
mhm.
of us knew what we had there, and I was, at that point, hosting America's Funniest Videos for ABC, and Hollywood Squares had already gone away in 2004. Um, and a lot of the stuff was written by really talented writers, one of whom was a good buddy of mine, but it was still, I'm doing a live show. This doesn't feel organic. So when we went into the second season in February, I think of '06, I went to the producers and said, I'm not happy with how I'm hosting this. I'd rather it be organic. And I also think that the only way I'm really going to have a visceral sense, I mean, I have an intellectual sense that it must be difficult for people to come out of their comfort zone and dance on live TV. How could you not understand that on a basic level? But I wanted to feel it in every fiber of my being with the belief that that would help how I hosted the show. It never hurts to increase your empathy level, when you're doing something like that. And so I endeavored to do a quick step with Ashley Del Grosso, who was wonderfully patient with me. She had just had 4 weeks trying to move Master P around the ballroom. And it was like having an armoire with shoes. And
I don't even think he had this much room.
Right. Yeah. So she went from the frying pan into the fire with me. And she said, "Why'd you pick a quick step? That's one of the most difficult ballroom dances." I said, "Well, I wasn't really thinking about it like that. I thought of the comic potential of it because I wanted it to be an homage to my love for silent comedy like Chaplin and Keaton and more modern day physical comedians like my friend now, Dick Van Dyke." And so there was some definite Rob Petrie moves I did in there, some Chaplin bobbles with the hat and things. And it gave me a little bit of an out too, in the dance, but it was important to me when the producers offered me the chance to pre-record it. I said, "Well, no, I want to know what they feel like when it's live and you could screw up." So that's the way I did it. And truly from that point on, I felt like I hosted the show much better.
Well, if you had somebody sitting in front of you and I know obviously you've interviewed a lot of famous people and celebrities, and sometimes they get nervous too. So if you've got somebody who's, just getting, started in doing interviews of some sort, and maybe they're a little nervous, especially if they're, meeting somebody they, admire so much. What kind of advice would you give them? And the second part of that question is thinking about somebody who's just starting their career in television, maybe in broadcast journalism, or maybe, looking for different ways to integrate in the industry. What kind of advice would you give to them?
Well, in the first part, the nervous energy, I mean, there are a couple of ways you can go with that. And most people, when you're interviewing them, if you're just up for, I mean, if it's really to the point that you think you might, screw it up because you're so nervous, there's no harm in saying to the person, "I am a big fan and I'm really nervous talking to you." I was in Concord, New Hampshire, last week, and William Shatner, who's a friend, was there. They were doing a screening of Star Trek II, and then he'd come out on stage, and a buddy of mine who does radio in New Hampshire was the moderator. And we were having dinner in Bill's dressing room before he came out, and somebody came in to, make sure everything was fine. And they said to him, I just got to tell you, I'm so nervous meeting you. And it was a compliment, and he took it that way. And he went, "Why are you, basically he said, we all put our pants on one leg at a time, and I think that's the thing I've come to learn over time in talking to a number of people whose achievements have impressed me or given me goals to shoot for or whatever, that there are worse things to do than just being honest with a person and telling them of your appreciation of who they are, that you're enthused to be in their company, that you're nervous about, messing it up. I mean, you got to play that. Some people might get their backs up, but I think they're rare. I think, it's not a bad strategy. And in terms of people starting their careers or being on TV or radio or whatever podcast, I would just go back to what I was saying earlier to you and Eddie, that think about the person on the other side of that equipment. You've got a great gig. Yeah, you're doing something that you wanted to do. Somebody on the other side of that microphone or camera might be having a really shit day or
Oh, yeah.
time in their lives. And we've been through the past, 2 years plus where everybody knows somebody who's been touched or lost somebody in this. If you can get out of your own head to a degree, trust whatever you bring to it, and think more about the person on the other side, even if you never see them, you never know who they are, you just know that they're there.
Yeah.
That helps. It doesn't mean you have to suddenly, become like this. How are you? How are you doing? Yeah, that's right. Hey, you know, but if that's a subtext of everything you do, I'm doing it for you,
Yeah.
and you're having fun doing it, and get out of the less your own ego is involved, because let's face it, our egos are the engine by which we power through our lives and career to a degree.
Mhm.
But you can put bad fuel in that engine, and you can also put really good fuel in it too. And I think the degree to which you're thinking about your audience in the sense of a person, it helps.
You're a really good writer. I mean, even speaking, you're right. I'm like, I want to write that one down. I have so many quotes for your book. I'm like, be careful what grade of fuel you put in that engine.
Yeah, but it's true though, isn't it?
I like what you said that. I'm also a church musician on the weekends. And
Mhm.
I don't have a great voice or anything, but for some reason when I'm in that church and I'm playing, I'll look around and I'm touching some people's hearts. And it's
That's
like
right.
you don't worry about yourself, you worry about them, and either
Yeah.
smile or whatever lyric you're doing, the way you play the guitar. So yeah, I
Yeah.
really
Yeah, and it costs, it's like, every so often, if somebody recognizes me, and asks for, a picture or something like that, and yeah, unless it's really intrusive, which is very rare, it takes a second. And it reminds me of a story, back in the days of the Boston Marathon being sponsored by John Hancock Insurance, right? And a friend of mine, she worked for John Hancock, and her job was to go to Logan Airport and pick up the person who was going to perform for the runners on the eve of the Boston Marathon. They'd have this big carb loading dinner for a number of the runners. And that particular year, George Burns was going to perform, and he was in his early 90s at that point. He lived to be 100. So she picks him up at Logan Airport and drives him to, I think it was the Park Plaza Hotel or whatever it was in Boston. And he was for those who know who George Burns was, a very distinctive presence. So they're walking into the lobby. They already had his room, set up for him, and people started recognizing him and coming over and asking for pictures and autographs. And he always had an unlit cigar as a prop. So by the time that was all done and they get to the elevator, my friend Janice said, "Mr. Burns, you didn't have to do all that." And he goes, "Well, sweetheart, it takes as much time to be a nice guy as an asshole."
Ah, yeah.
And the choice that you make and the ripple effects of that choice are profound.
I've been with Good Morning America 35 years, and so I go back with the Canon Sure Shot cameras, and I
Oh,
used to
sure. Yeah.
everybody,
Yeah.
and everybody was always yes, 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 and it was because it was the smaller studio, 4 cameras, 2 stage managers, 1 small green room, 1 hair and makeup room, so it was nice. Now with GMA, we're upstairs, downstairs, outside, in the dressing rooms, all over the
Yeah.
place. But I always notice if you go to a celebrity and talk to them or ask for a picture and autograph, 99.9% they say yes, but it's more their PR people and their people with them,
Exactly.
email and this and that.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
like protecting them. And it's like, why?
From what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
And to me, that's market research. I mean, in a very real sense, somebody comes up and is willing to talk to you or engage with you about something they've seen or heard you do, and they have an opinion on it, be it positive or maybe constructively negative. That's market research right there. Why would you
Absolutely.
turn a deaf ear,
Yeah. You
Um,
don't have to absorb it all, but
right.
listening doesn't hurt you.
It doesn't hurt. Yeah, it doesn't hurt.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, because I think we've said this during another interview too, is one of the fun things I love about Robin Roberts is that when we were doing in studio, when there were in studio audiences before, the world stopped turning,
Yeah.
unless she had someplace to be, she will stay until every single person who wants a picture with her will get a picture with her.
Yeah.
And if she knows she has to leave early, she'll try and do it in any commercial break. And it's just a little thing, but it means so much to everybody. And then I notice that anytime somebody posts that picture and they're like, oh my God, I had a great time at Good Morning America, she responds to every one of them. And you can, I mean, it's her, she does that on hers. And it makes a difference. Those are the impressions that you want to be left with, because that tells your legacy.
Yeah. Yeah. I think so. I think so. And it's a great gift that we in the public eye have to, I mean, it's a gift to us to get people coming up and, oh, I grew up with you, or I'll have people in their 20s and early 30s now who watched, I started doing AFV back in 2001. So, they're some of those they were kids and now they're married with kids.
Sure.
And so that's great, to have been part of the fabric of people's lives to an extent.
So most of the people that are watching this right now, they're experts in their field. They're trying to get positions on news shows, Good Morning America type shows, or maybe they're starting out in their career. They want to be on camera as a reporter or a host. Throughout your career, we know most of the shows, many of the shows that you've been on. As a host, were you ever a producer, executive producer on any of those shows? And then how did that change? Like if you're a host of a show and an EP, then you don't have to talk to anybody. Like, you make your own decisions and stuff. Like, how does that all work?
Well, there were a couple occasions on the Fox show that was an outgrowth of the cable show. I was a co-executive producer. Which when things started to hit the fan, I realized it was useless. It was just, because it wasn't, it's not like it was my money or my show. So ultimately, when Fox had issues with the direction, I could wave my title around as much as I wanted, but it wasn't going to mean, a hill of beans. And then on the video show, where I became a senior producer, it didn't really, to be honest, it didn't change anything that I did. It was really just Vin DeBona being very gracious and acknowledging my contribution to the show and kind of giving me that title, which he didn't have to do, but I was very appreciative of. But I think, I think like a producer anyway, and sometimes that's gotten me in trouble, but but that's sort of my feeling. Is I'm playing on a team sport here. And one of the things I do is, host the show. And in hosting the show, I want to be respectful of everything that's happened behind the scenes that gives me this sandbox to play in. And, like on the dancing show for many years, especially when we were doing 2 seasons a year and 2 nights a week, I would throw mid-season parties for the staff, cast, and crew. And the only rule I had, no plus ones. It's just us. Okay. Because different departments sometimes never know, they never intermingle.
Sure.
So you don't realize in your bubble what the people in the other bubble are doing to make this whole show work. So those parties became an opportunity to, get everybody to know each other, and also provided wonderful stories of hangovers and hookups. So, which I appreciated.
For our next show.
Yeah, but so I've always kind of thought like a producer and thought about how I benefit by the work everybody else is doing behind the scenes.
So with all those people behind the scenes, has there ever been a time that someone, producer, director, whatever, asked you to do something and was just like, nah, I can't do that?
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, there have been, been numerous occasions on shows where it just didn't feel right, or, and I would just say, no, I'm not gonna do it. I mean, look, when it came to a head with Footwork with the Famous, it was just a real clash of ideologies of, who are we as a show? What are we, supposed to be for our audience? Are we supposed to be another place where divisive energy goes to scream at each other, or are we a respite? Are we a break where you can all come together and just have a fun, silly, good time? I was in that latter camp. Other people weren't. And, so that was, to me, you got to pick the hill you're going to die on. That was worth it to me.
And other times people told him not to do things, and he did, like jump in a thing of orange juice.
Well, and that was on the Fox show, which was, at that point, it was clear that everything that we loved about the cable show, it was becoming torn asunder on the Fox show. And we had a pediatrician, and he was working in conjunction with Tropicana of all places. So on Fifth Avenue, there was this 6-foot tall, massive glass of orange juice, right? So I'm talking to this pediatrician on live TV, and at one point I said, I got to be honest with you, doctor, I'm not even listening to what you're saying. I just want to jump in this orange juice. And I could hear in the IFB, the producer I was battling with, going, "Don't you dare!" And I took it out. And the actor Gregory Harrison, who was on Trapper John MD and other shows, he was there. He gave me 10 fingers up. I took my microphone off and everything. Wow. And there are pictures, I think they're in the book, aren't they, of me just disappearing into this orange juice and it all coming over the top. And I was like totally exfoliated in that moment. But it was basically me flipping the bird to the network and saying, this is what the show should have been, because this is what the cable show was.
Sure.
It was crazy, and you took opportunities and risks, and you went in an unpredictable direction because you wanted to become water cooler talk. You wanted to, give people something that they didn't expect. And standing next to a big glass of orange juice talking about the importance of vitamin C, but jumping in the orange juice, that was fun.
Plus, that'll get people to stop on the sidewalk and see what you're doing.
Yeah, that's right.
And another giant glass of orange juice.
Right.
Oh, Tom, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure. I don't want to overstay our welcome, but I adore you. And yes, I'm going to talk about you all night long, and my husband's going to get tired of it again. I don't care. He can fight me.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure for me. And one of the real joys, if you can find any in this crazy time we've been in, is a lot of times I do interviews in my house. I don't even have long pants on. I do have pants on, however. But it's, it's fun to connect. And this has been a real pleasure. And Eddie, it's always great to see you.
Thank you.
And Michael, to make you a new friend.
Yay. I love it.